Okay, so we are picking up with where we left off in the previous session. And you'll recall that we're talking about the ideas of Nietzsche and the doctrine of nihilism. There's a great deal we could say about that. It's a huge area. There are people who know a great deal about that, do a lot of writing, academic writing on that as well. But we at least ought to note that this doctrine of nihilism, Nietzsche's ideas, have been extraordinarily influential. They've been very influential in academics, but in addition to academics, in literature, in film, in art, in architecture, even dance. The influence has been incalculable. Now, that's a whole subject in itself. That is why people latched on to these ideas and used them in the liberal arts and the fine arts as much as they have, in philosophy as much as they have. But that would go way beyond what we're able to do here. But it's a very interesting phenomenon. The question we want to ask, again, as we anticipated, is if O'Connor was concerned about this philosophy, then how does she use her literature to respond to it? We ought to note that she's not the only one who has responded in literary form to these philosophical ideas. More famous than O'Connor herself was Fyodor Dostoyevsky. And Dostoyevsky, in several of his novels, responds to this emerging idea of nihilism. In his novel, The Brothers Karamazov, The Possessed, and in several, The Possessed also might be translated The Devils. Even in Crime and Punishment, you find that he is dealing with these ideas and trying to, in some measure, even refute the ideas in literary form. So, just to reiterate one of Nietzsche's ideas that we need to expand on just a bit, and then we'll pick up O'Connor's response. So, we mentioned in the last session that Nietzsche talks about the last man and he talks about the overman. The overman is one who's going to lead us into the future after we've sort of cleared the playing field. He's going to lead us into the future and he's going to set the new rules, if there are to be new rules, through his creativity and through his will to power. Will to power is one of Nietzsche's inventions, and it's not easy to completely understand it, to completely articulate it, but using the phrase willpower, it helps. We're talking about people who are stronger and different than the rest of us, and Nietzsche even takes some people out of history who are at least sort of prototypes of this kind of individual. But what he's looking for are more and more of the people who are going to carry the human race beyond suffering, beyond the things that weigh us down. So there are some altruistic motives in all of this on Nietzsche's part. So we talked about the overman. What does he mean by the last man? He means people who have lost a sense of purpose. People who, if they had religion, they've lost it. People who, if they had a guiding moral philosophy, have lost that. They are products of this sort of closing of one age and moving into a different age. These are people who lack valor, they lack courage, they lack motivation, they lack purpose. They are, to use a phrase, they're couch potatoes. They sit around and they don't produce anything. They don't do anything. They're passive. And I think this is one of the areas that Nietzsche's philosophy is very useful, because I think he is describing something that we are surrounded by, and that is individuals who are now leading sort of superficial lives, whether those lives are completely preoccupied and supported by technology, or if they are doing no more than trying to satisfy their pleasure and their desire, as Aldous Huxley anticipated in his novel Brave New World. Whatever the case is, these last men need to go the way of history. And in this, O'Connor agreed in some measure with Nietzsche. She recognized that people have lost, by losing their philosophy, by losing their religion, by losing their purpose. There are those that we might describe as last men. Now, there is one instance in O'Connor's correspondence where she describes this phenomenon. She doesn't use the word last men, but she does describe what it is that we're talking about. And she writes to a friend that she'd heard news from the poultry industry, the chicken raising industry. By the way, I have a student who said that their family owns 20,000 chickens, I think. They have a chicken farm. It's a huge industry. But O'Connor in her day said that she had read that a new development in the poultry industry was the breeding of chickens without wings, so that these chickens would have more white meat, since white meat is the preferred meat, and that there would be more of it. So chickens without wings. And then she went on to say, I guess that's what Nietzsche meant when he said God is dead. Fascinating connection, is it not? She went on to say, we have become a generation of wingless chickens. The morality has been bred out of this generation in the same way that the wings have been removed from chickens. So this is O'Connor's way of recognizing that that part of Nietzsche's genius consisted of being able to diagnose our age, being able to see the weaknesses of our age. However, having said that, O'Connor's prescription is going to be much different than that of Nietzsche. So in response to the idea that God is dead, O'Connor recognizes the trend. That is the movement away from religion, the movement into a kind of a post-Christian society. But her solution to that is not to accept what someone argues is inevitable, but rather to argue that we need more than ever the introduction of grace into our lives, and we need a renewed sense of divine purpose, a renewed experience of God's grace in order to revive those parts of us that are in need of a relationship with God and in need of the grace of God. So on the one hand, yes, God is dead in terms of the falling away of the dominance of the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Enlightenment tradition. On the other hand, that's not inevitable, and our response to that should not be to accept that, rather to revive the tradition that we are losing a grip on. For her, there's no other solution to that. Her response to the idea that we need to move beyond good and evil is that plan will result in nothing more than embracing evil. You can't move beyond good and evil. And if you think you can, you're going to find that you created a kind of a vacuum, and what's going to rush into that vacuum will be nothing than a kind of an experience of evil. One of her stories, "The Lame Shall Enter First," deals with this kind of consequence, as does several of her other stories as well. But "The Lame Shall Enter First" is a very disturbing story, and it's one that seems to say a lot about evil. In terms of the overman, that is Nietzsche's idea that we need to let emerge in our midst people who will lead us into the future. O'Connor believes we need a kind of an overman also, but not the one that Nietzsche described. Her overman are people who are not conspicuous by their arrogance, by their defiance of tradition and their defiance of religious norms, societal norms. Rather, her overmen are those who are willing to submit themselves to the action of grace in their lives and to the experience of self-knowledge, to humble themselves rather than to stand on their arrogance, to humble themselves and thereby move into a deeper, into a fuller, and to a more significant spiritual experience. And these are the people that we need to look to for guidance in the future, not some sort of overman who is going to defy everything that we've stood on, and by so doing, create a new future for us.